Welcome back to Designsmith. Today I'm going to be creating a Slowdive concert poster completely from scratch. Last week I was able to go to their show in Tennessee and it was incredible. Seeing Slowdive in a cave, that's something I never thought I would be able to see. The acoustics were perfect and all the people that I talked to there were just really cool. And they kicked off the show with Slow-Mo, which in my opinion, you cannot start a Slowdive concert with a better song. Before we get started, please consider subscribing to support the channel. Okay, so what I want to do is make a poster that is very specific to this particular show. And of course it took place inside of a cave, so I'd like to do something along those lines. So I'm going to look at some cave images here on Unsplash, and I kind of have an idea of what I'm wanting to do. I just got to make sure that it's going to work for what I'm wanting to achieve. And this image right here is really cool, so I'm going to click on this, right click on it, and then copy image. And I'm going to create an 18 by 24 inch with a resolution of 300 in Photoshop. And I'll just paste this image right in here, and I'm going to hit Command T on my keyboard, and we're just going to enlarge this like that. All right, so I'm just going to bring this down here. All right, so the first thing I want to do here is get the lighting to be a lot more similar to it was that night in the cave. So I'm going to go over here to the adjustment layers and click on gradient map. And the default of the gradient map should be whatever your two colors over here on the side are. So I'm going to click on this gradient and we're going to adjust this a little bit, bring it up to about 5 on that black. I don't want it to be all the way down to 0. So I'm going to create a new stop right here and we'll just click on the color. And what I'm wanting is blue with a little bit of purple mixed in. So now we can just kind of play around with these colors right here. The further that I move over to black, the more blue that's going to put in there. So what I'm wanting is a pretty good amount of black with some blues and purples. And that right there is looking good, so I'll hit OK. And now I want to go in here and add a curves layer style to make the lighting just a little bit more dramatic. All right, that's really good, and it's still showing that this is obviously a cave. So I'm happy with this. So I'm going to select everything. I'm going to hit Command or Control E, and that's going to flatten everything down to one solid background. All right, so now I'm going to hit Command J on my keyboard, and that is going to duplicate our background layer. And I want to play around with Posterize. And Posterize is just going to take everything that's in the design and just simplify it down. I think a level of 6 is going to work really well for this. It's still a nice and high quality image right here, so that is looking good. And then I'm going to change the blending mode on this Posterize to Color Dodge. And that's just going to kind of brighten things up just a little bit more and give it a much more dramatic look. And now I'm going to add a grain layer to the very top because you know I love grain layers. And I'm going to hit Shift and Delete, and that is going to bring up our fill box. I'm going to select 50% gray, hit OK. And go to Filter and Camera Raw Filter. I'm going to crank up the grain to 100, and the size and the roughness I'm going to set both to 25. And then I am going to add a vignette here to make it much more dramatic. I think I'm going to do -50 and hit OK. And now I'll change that blending mode to overlay. So here's before and here's after. And you can also see those grain layers, especially on the outer edges. All right, so I'm happy with the setting of this. So now let's go into Illustrator and create some typography. And we're going to go old school with the Slowdive logo, and that is Hoffler text. And let's change this over to optical. That'll give us a good starting point for kerning. I'm just going to make a couple of adjustments here. All right, the rest of that is looking good. So rather than create all of my type and then copy it over into Photoshop, I'm going to create all the text layers one by one because there's not going to be a lot of them on this poster. After all, this poster is for one specific Slowdive concert, so there doesn't have to be too much going on here. So I pasted this as a smart object, and one thing that I should have done from the very beginning, I'm so bad about doing this, is create a new guide layout. And I would say anywhere from 1.5 to 2 inches is going to give you a good safe zone to work in. So I'll do 1.5 inches for this. And let's double click on this and click on color overlay, and we'll give it a white. However, we're going to back it off on opacity to about 90%. I'm wondering if we should enlarge this. I just want to kind of see what it looks like. It's looking good right there. And I think I'm going to add just a very slight bevel and emboss. And we obviously need to play around with this a little bit. I think we'll go a direction of up and just a really, really small amount, maybe 20%. And we'll do the size probably around 30 to 40. I just want it to be very subtle. And then we'll soften it to 10. And I want to play around with the possibility of doing a stroke, but also want that to be very subtle as well. All right, that's looking good. I like that. It's just enough texture, but not too much. All right, so the next thing I want to show you is the beauty of creating smart objects from Illustrator into Photoshop. And if you want to learn more about using smart objects in Photoshop, check out this video above. But what we're going to do is double click on this thumbnail And this is going to take us back into Illustrator where our smart object originated. And one thing that I want to play around with is the tracking. So let's bring us up to about 200 or so. And that's a lot closer to the actual Slowdive logo. And now I'm just going to save this. And now we can go back into Photoshop and you can see that it's updated in there. However, obviously we have to bring up our guides and then adjust the sizing. And we'll hit OK and we'll bring this down to right there where that is. All right, that is looking a lot cooler. All right, so let's make sure that we close this vector smart object and let's set the kerning of this to 200 so that way it matches. However, the next text that we bring in is going to be significantly smaller. And I'm just going to write the Caverns, Pelham, Tennessee, May 8th, 2024. Let's move it over here so we can see it a little bit better. And most of the time when I set my tracking at a really high number like that, I don't usually go in and change my kerning. However, I see a couple of areas here that I want to make sure I go in and change. Like the distance between this M and this A right here, it's way too far apart. Same thing with the 2 and the 0. I will bring in this T and this H. So I'm going to select all of this, but what we're going to do before we bring it in is I'm going to really decrease the leading to about 180. That looks good. Now we'll select all of that, hit copy, and paste this as a smart object. Bring up our guides again. And I'm going to bring it to here. I'm going to hit OK. And then bring our transform back up again. And then go up here to the width and type in 50%. And we'll just bring this right down to here. And I'm going to set my baseline right where that guideline is. And now all we have to do is hold down Option or Alt and hover over the effects icon, click and drag to our new layer, and it picks up everything that's right here. And then the last step is to select the grain layer and then just move it to the top. And now that text is inheriting all of that grain texture. So here it is, our Slowdive Caverns poster for Pelham, Tennessee. Very simple concept, but as you can see, you can take an image and just by adjusting it slightly, create a very dramatic effect for the poster that you're designing. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I also hope that one day you'll be able to see Slowdive in concert if you haven't already. It was an amazing show, and I would definitely go back if they ever come back to the States. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider subscribing to support the channel, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.